the majesty of our planet's landscape. From vast flatlands and oceans to the craggy peaks of the highest mountains, we are defined more by our natural surroundings than we're often aware. There are forces lurking beneath the Earth's crust, forces powerful enough to shape our landscape, alter the Earth's natural weather patterns, and snuff out entire civilizations in a heartbeat. The island of Martinique in the Caribbean was settled in 1635 by the French explorer Ansembuc, who quickly established the city of Saint-Pierre. Over the next 100 years, Saint-Pierre would become the hub of Martinique's island economy.
This quarter of Saint-Pierre was an agricultural district, a fertile area with large plantations, large agricultural activities, and parallel to this quarter would be the Moulage quarter, more to the south. The Moulage quarter was linked to the boats that came to supply the colony with provisions, because not everything was cultivated or produced on site.
Dubbed the Paris of the Caribbean, the community of almost 30,000 matures into a cultural center for the island.
There were buildings, hotels, the theater of Saint-Pierre, which was very reputable. The theater received companies from all over Europe. The metropolitans that arrived could hear opera songs being sung out in the street. It was the fashion, too. I remember the fashion. People were well-dressed. People read. There was culture.
Marking the Martinique skyline are the majestic peaks of Mont Pelée, which stand nearly 1,400 meters above sea level. Housing what was once an active volcano, Pelée had not seen any activity in decades. But by the late 1800s, Mont Pelée begins to show signs of waking.
The first warning signs were visible as of 1882, with the clouds of sulfuric gases at the summit of the volcano, and more importantly, the sulfur smells, which were very noticeable to the north of Saint-Pierre in the commune of Pelee.
But by 1902, sulfurous gas emissions from Pelée become frequent and are noticed in the city of Saint-Pierre. But for many, Pelée's renewed activity is little more than a conversation piece.
L'éruption qui avait eu lieu précédemment était au milieu du 19e siècle.
The previous eruption occurred in the middle of the 19th century, but people didn't really have a really horrible memory of it. They remembered it more as a beautiful show. They weren't attacked, destroyed, so they didn't imagine it to be what it was.
For others, like the Gauguin family, the sulfurous emissions prove no more than a minor annoyance as they go about their daily regimen. Louis-Auguste Cyprius concentrates on keeping out of sight. He is at large after escaping from the Martinique jail a few days before. 1 month later, Pelée spurts a cloud of ash into the atmosphere.
Smoke rolls appeared at the summit of the volcano, and we saw the appearance of ash emissions, of vapors, and after that an eruption, a vaporous eruption that descended into the atmosphere.
There's a number of precursor events which could lead up to an eruption. Before the magma rises to the surface, it actually brecciates and fractures the rock underground there, so we see a swarm of little micro-earthquakes and tremors. So if you're actually on the volcano, you'd feel the ground shaking.
Ash showers become so constant, carriage wheels are muffled by the bed of fallen cinders that cover the street. Tremors become steadily more violent.
Small eruptions can be taken as a precursor to a large eruption. As the magma sort of rises to the surface, it does so in pulses. So if you have one eruption, it's very likely you're going to have 2 or 3 more.
The first wave of panic ripples through the population. Some leave their homes for other islands. Yet many are still convinced that the increased volcanic activity will soon subside, such as shoemaker Léon Compère Léandre, who is more concerned with filling his backlog of orders. Residents are encouraged by the comparative quiet of May 4th, among them the Gauguin family, who takes the opportunity to enjoy the reprieve. In the nearby town of Corbeil, the Soulange family also breathes a sigh of relief, even though their youngest child, Michel, seems to be falling ill. For nearly 3 decades, the Gourin-Oussine sugar refinery has been a cornerstone of Saint-Pierre's industry. The owner and his 25 employees arrive for work amidst the now familiar rumblings of the volcano. Others are not so easily assured. Having closely observed the volcanic developments of Mont Pelée since its awakening, natural sciences professor Landé notices a strange phenomenon playing out in the Rivière Blanche near the summit.
At Mount Pelée, there was a crater lake filled with water, and as the volcano started to heat up and become more active, this lake started to boil, and eventually the actual edges of the lake collapsed, releasing a torrent of this water down into the local river system, which swelled sort of 4 or 5 times its normal size. It carried boulders, ash and material, producing a huge mud flow, which we call a lahar.
Several thousand cubic tons of mud spew from the side of the mountain, descending into Saint-Pierre at breakneck speed, decimating everything in its path.
The people would have seen a wall of mud coming down the mountain at extremely fast speeds, and the noise would have been a loud roaring noise.
Directly in the mudflow's path is the Gourin-Oussine sugar refinery. It is instantaneously consumed, killing all 25 employees. That same day, Martinique Governor Moutet calls for an immediate inquiry into the mudslide, resulting in the formation of a scientific panel of experts. Professor Landé is among them.
Cette commission s'est réunie et n'ont pas trouvé cette dangerosité, tout simplement que le phénomène.
This commission met, and they did not find any danger. They thought that if they had an eruption with lava, that the valleys that surrounded the city would act as a barrier for the town.
Professor Landé's report garners the full endorsement of the governor, who finds a receptive audience as he encourages residents to stay in Saint-Pierre.
There were people from the surrounding city of Corbeil, of Precheur, of Montrouge, who felt safer in the city of Saint-Pierre, who came to seek shelter in Saint-Pierre. So simply, this city built of stone gave a feeling of being more solid and more protective.
Les Pierrotains ne voulaient pas s'éloigner de leurs affaires. Il y avait des commerçants, il y avait des
Pierrotains did not want to leave their affairs behind. There were merchants, there were riches, and there were possessions that the people did not want to abandon without knowing how they would be protected. These are the reasons why some people stayed.
Yet some question if the governor's motivations are purely in the interests of public safety.
Another explanation is that the second round of the legislative elections was to take place on Sunday, so people had to stay where they were to vote. Governor Moutet asked people to stay where they were in order to go to the polls.
Questions also arise regarding the validity of the scientific report. Rumors abound that Landé has bowed to political pressure from the governor.
He became anxious, and it is said that he should have warned the authorities so that we could have evacuated the city. But it was never done, always for those famous political reasons.
An editorial published in the local paper openly mocks those choosing to flee Saint-Pierre, further conflicting those who are undecided.
It was also a religious holiday because it was Ascension Thursday. Therefore, a lot of Pierrotains had reason to stay. Also, many had evacuated their families but remained behind themselves for professional reasons.
Dans la nuit donc du 7 au 8
On the night of the 7th of May, there was terrible rain. Torrential rain with the emanations of ash. Black ash which obscured the summit and the town, which really scared the population.
Et au sommet du volcan, des éclairs et le tonnerre qui effrayaient, si on peut dire, la population.
The Devold family and their boarder Léon Compère-Léon watch the spewings of Mont Pelée from their home until they are driven elsewhere. Seeking shelter, Louis-Auguste Cyprius voluntarily turns himself into police that evening. As night falls on May 7, 1902, close to 30,000 people are in Saint-Pierre, and Mont Pelée prepares to alter their lives forever. Daylight breaks on Martinique on the 8th of May to reveal a decimated landscape. The once lush lands at the foot of Mont Pelée have turned a lifeless gray, beaten down by the relentless ash and volcanic shrapnel. Water continues rushing through the Rivière Blanche at an alarming rate, described as hitting the sea with freight train velocity. Yet Pelée's violent tremblings of the previous night have subsided. A few kilometers to the south of Saint-Pierre, merchant Charles Gauguin and his son Henri head for the harbor to pick up a shipment due to arrive that morning. They leave behind Charles' two daughters, Elise and Jeanne. The Soulange family prepares to attend Ascension Day services, but Michel is too sick to accompany them.
All of my mother's relatives had gone to Mass. They didn't live too far from the church, only 200 meters or so. They had gone to Mass, and she had a bout of bronchitis, so she didn't go. She was confined to the house.
In an effort to convince citizens that Mont Pelée is not dangerous, Governor Moutet, along with his wife and Secretary of State, make an excursion to the summit for a personal inspection. At a few minutes before 8 o'clock, it happens without warning.
La première démolition a eu lieu, si on peut dire, par l'onde de choc.
The first demolition took place with the shock wave that destroyed homes. Homes fell in on their inhabitants.
A burning cloud of ash and gas, known as a nuée ardente, descends on the town at 500 kilometers an hour.
This hurricane force wind which poured down the side of the volcano with this massive flow of gas, supercharged gas, very hot, very fast flowing with rock and ash particles, and this would have just raced down the side of the volcano, accelerating with gravity down the steep slopes until it hit the town of Saint-Pierre some 2 seconds later.
The nuée ardente rips through Saint-Pierre, its blinding heat consuming everything in its path.
Saint-Pierre had been completely pulverized, carbonized, blown away in one moment. In 5 minutes, the city was destroyed by the fiery ash cloud. If you look at the documents, you will see that the speed of the fiery ash cloud prevented practically all escape.
Miraculously, those in communities surrounding Saint-Pierre are spared from the deadly cloud.
The death cloud didn't overcome the hills that are between Saint-Pierre and Coulson, but it was able to follow the length of the valleys and the ocean border. The death cloud extended all the way to Coulson River.
As the Gauguin sisters try to comprehend what has happened, a painful realization sinks in.
They had nothing left. They were totally orphaned. Fortunately, they had an uncle who was a pharmacist and who didn't have any children and who was able to take them in.
In a matter of minutes, the city of Saint-Pierre and its nearly 30,000 inhabitants are swept into oblivion. Among them, Governor Moutet and his wife, who are killed halfway up the summit. In addition to the gas cloud, The percussion of the eruption produces a tidal wave over 100 feet high that decimates the island of Martinique.
Carbet was entirely destroyed by this tidal wave. Those that arrived after saw that there was no one left in the town because everyone ran towards the highest hills.
With the tidal wave having destroyed many of the boats on Martinique, vessels are dispatched from surrounding islands to aid survivors.
Certain people brought nothing with them but their jewelry. There was one lady who had a basket of jewelry, but when she arrived on the beach, they said, "You aren't bringing anything. You can only bring yourself." So these people felt bad to have to get rid of this basket of jewelry.
For many, the beach is a gathering point where family members are reunited, among them the Soulange family.
It was a neighbor that got my mother out, and she rejoined her parents on the height of the Exodus. She said, "I only had my little porcelain doll that I pressed against my heart." My mother was only 8 years old then, so she was only a little girl and had lots of emotions.
The Gauguin sisters also arrive at the beach, but not before encountering several horrifying sights along their way.
They tried to go to Font Saint-Denis, but they weren't able to cross the river, so they went back to Enfantin. Enfantin was full of injured people, of burnt people who were laying down on banana leaves. Their flesh would stick to your hand if you tried to move them.
Amazingly, a survivor is found in the heart of Saint-Pierre.
Les murs font près d'un mètre d'épaisseur et avec peu d'ouverture. Donc la nuée est
The
passée
walls
sur
were
la
nearly
ville,
1 meter
a
thick with
jeté,
very
si on
few
peut dire,
openings.
quelques
So when the
cendres,
Nuée
quelques
Ardente
chaleurs
passed
dans
over,
la cellule,
some heat got
mais
into
ne
the
l'a
cell,
pas tué,
but he was
l'a
not
brûlé
killed.
effectivement,
He was
brièvement.
burned, and
Et
it
ce
wasn't
n'est que
until
3
3
jours
days
après,
after the
donc, la
catastrophe that he
qu'il a
was
été
found
retrouvé
by
par des
rescuers.
sauveteurs venant du Morne Rouge et qu'il a été soigné. Si Paris a eu cette célébrité, si on peut dire,
Cyprus attained
mondiale,
world celebrity.
puisque
He joined with
grâce
Barnum and
aussi
Bailey
au
Circus,
palais
and he was able to do a world
il a
tour
pu
to
faire
exhibit his
une
wounds
mondiale
and tell the
pour
tale of the
exhiber ses
catastrophe.
blessures et raconter le récit de la catastrophe.
Shoemaker Léon Compère Léon, by some miracle, is also found alive in his. He and Cyprius are all that remain of the population of Saint-Pierre. With its population wiped out, the city of Saint-Pierre falls into relative obscurity.
Saint-Pierre was a no man's land from 1902 to 1912. There was no more vegetation. People were afraid to come to Saint-Pierre because the volcanic phenomenon really touched the lives of the population. People came to Saint-Pierre to see what was left, the ruins of the catastrophe. And it wasn't really until 1917 that the economic life really came back.
Fort-de-France becomes the center of commerce for the island of Martinique. Despite a resettling of the area, Saint-Pierre never reaches its former population of 30,000.
Today, Saint-Pierre is a small community. It has at most 5,000 people, whereas the population was close to 30,000 people on the eve of the eruption.
The memory of those lost souls from 1902 are embodied in a statue which lies in the resurrected town square.
She is the symbol of Saint-Pierre being reborn. She was offered to the town of Saint-Pierre in 1928 to mark the rebirth of the town.
To ensure the tragedy of May 8, 1902 is never repeated, a volcano observation station is set up to monitor potential activity on Mont Pelee. In addition, an escape plan has been devised in the event that Pelee erupts again.
Right now, the school curriculum is teaching the risks of volcanoes and seismics, so the population is informed.
Despite the 100 years that have passed since that cataclysmic eruption, Mount Pelée's terrifying legacy still lives on.
There are still people who have never set foot on Saint-Pierre because they are afraid of the volcano. My mother is terrified of the idea of spending a couple of days in Saint-Pierre, sleeping in the eye of the volcano.
Vous n'allez pas me faire grimper sur la montagne Pelée. Il y avait aussi.
You won't get me to climb Mount Pelee. At the museum, there is a telescope that lets you look closely at the volcano. But I never dared to look at Pelee up close. I am too afraid to.
The volcano has erupted twice since 1902, once in August of that year, and again in 1929. But the extreme violence of the May 8, 1902 eruption has earned it the title of the worst volcanic disaster of the 20th century.